Good afternoon. That was the best one of these yet. I just want to reiterate that this event, one of the goals of this event is to be as inclusive as humanly possible. So if you feel unsafe or unwelcome for any reason, if anything weird happens, if anybody says something weird, just grab somebody in a blue shirt. If you can't find someone in a blue shirt, grab the front desk and we can help you. So our next speaker is a teacher, physician, and software engineer. He's been an Apple developer since the Macintosh SE, and he's been an iPhone developer since 3GS. Thomas Engel.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be able to speak with you, and I'm grateful. About this talk, so I'm going to talk about world poverty, the biggest problem of our time. My advice, though, is small. How can we make a difference in that? Is to start small. So I'm going to talk about very big and very small in this talk. My talk is going to be generic. I'm not going to tell you what to believe or what to do. What you do, you have to be passionate about. That comes from within you. And I intend for my talk to be practical, where I give advice. If you think, well, that's just common sense, then that will be perfect. All right, about you. This talk is for you who have strong technical skills, strong desire to help people, and a strong desire to make a positive difference in the world. I chose a career teaching and helping other people, and I chose to work in institutions with a strong sense of mission. I've been a board member of 2 small nonprofit corporations, and I've spent between 2,000 and 3,000 hours volunteering in my community and teaching volunteers. I've also spent a little time volunteering in rural Chiapas, Mexico, so the south of Mexico, the poorest part of Mexico. So when I was growing up, the world was divided into the first world. This is a graph of income per person versus life expectancy. And the size of the circle, these are countries, the size of the circle, or the area of the circle is proportional to the population. So the United States and Europe is here with high money and high life, and is about 1/5 of the world's population, and is the first world. In the bottom corner, the 2 largest circles are China and India. And all of the blue circles are countries in Africa. And this is about 3/5 of the world's population in 1960. And this is the third world. Fast forward today. India and China have grown in life and money. And now most of the world is grouped together, 4/5 of the world grouped together, but the countries in Africa didn't move very much, and they're the bottom billion. These graphs come from Gapminder, which is an awesome website. It has the highest quality data for 2 centuries of population and economic and health data, mostly from the UN. It's created by Hans Rosling. And if you like anything about my talk, the very next thing you should do is watch all of his talks on TED. I'm going to have a slide at the end with all of the URLs, things that I mentioned, so you don't have to copy them now. So how did we get the bottom billion? Most of the world has grown at 5 to 8% annual growth per year. Compounded, this has brought 4/5 of the world together. About a fifth of the world, though, has been trapped in less than 1% growth, and that is the bottom billion, and it is mostly in Africa. There are a few exceptions to that: Afghanistan, Cambodia, for example. This book is the best explanation I've found for why this occurred. And Paul Collier is an economist who worked at the World Bank for a long time. It's an evidence-based book. It's not ideological. There are 4 traps that have kept the countries in the bottom billion. Conflict. Prolonged and repetitive civil war, coup d'etat, is fueled by hopelessness and greed. The war destroys the infrastructure, displaces people, and prevents investment. It may maim or kill a very large number of people, and Rwanda would be the poster country for this problem. You might think that natural resources would be of great benefit to a country and lead to prosperity, but it hasn't, as it has in some places in the Middle East. But in Africa, this has not been true. The resource exports cause the country's currencies to rise in value relative to the other currencies, and that makes it harder for any other export to be profitable. The resource wealth also supports corrupt regime, and the resource wealth makes conflict more likely. Chad would be an example country. Here, the colonial powers really screwed up. So a country like Central African Republic is surrounded on all sides by bad neighbors. So they have no opportunity to trade with their neighbors. They have no opportunity to trade with anyone else. And they have no synergy, no supporting parts or services for their industry. So everything is more expensive. And they get all the displaced people and violence from their surrounding countries. This is perhaps the greatest of them: corruption. Corruption takes almost all of the money. Bad policies and inconsistency discourage investment. Democracy is not enough to stop corruption. Bribery and patronage get people elected and reelected indefinitely. Here, Chad is another example. What about foreign aid? This is the best book explaining the failure of foreign aid that I've found. Dambisa Moyo is a woman from Africa, an economist. Billions in aid have produced little or no improvement. At best, it's wasted. Largely, it's caused great harm. Aid is like a natural resource. It prevents exports and supports corruption. Fair trade is a form of aid. It discourages diversification, an unintended consequence that keeps people trapped. Low-income countries have agriculture and labor. Trade barriers to these things raise prices in our countries and prevent exports and diversification in low-income countries. Also, participating in corrupt deals supports bad governance. Liberalizing trade policies, stopping agricultural support and tariffs is the single most important thing that a country can do to support the bottom billion. There are 2 things that are particularly interesting to us as individuals. Money in low-growth countries is invested in markets with higher growth to receive a higher rate of return. And experts, as soon as they become expert in a low-growth country, move to a higher-growth country so that they can have more income. I have not been to Africa. These pictures are from my sister-in-law who visited Kalicha Township, which is near Cape Town, South Africa. And this is a pretty representative sample of how people in the bottom billion live. And it's not as bad as you might think. There's electricity, car, these are homemade houses. People who live here, the median income or median standard of living in Africa now is about equal to the median standard of living of our grandparents in Europe in 1930. People have clothes, people are clean. This young man who is working has an Adidas soccer jersey on in anticipation of the World Cup. Communal water, communal toilets, much as our grandparents or maybe great-grandparents may have used outhouses. So coming back to those two things that were interesting to us, we may have two opportunities to help. Microloans are small loans to distant entrepreneurs, typically with no collateral. Microloans, especially the loans to women in the bottom billion countries, have been extremely successful. And you can start your own development fund. Put away $50, $25 a month into microloans, and as that money comes back in, repaid with interest, then reinvest that. And here's a place that you could get started doing it. Kiva is the Kickstarter of microloans and matches people around the world who need microloans with people who can make microloans. And also notice that almost all of the pictures that they show of loan opportunities to fund are of women. This bed and breakfast was created with microloans by this woman. This is a very successful venture. People coming to visit the township stay in this bed and breakfast. She's repaid all of her loans. She used other loans to expand, and now she makes loans to her neighbors. What about volunteering? Technical volunteering, you can supply the skills that are lost to the flight of expertise. You may travel to the place where you are needed, where the expertise is needed, or you might be able to help from where you are. My advice is to start small. And in fact, I think you should walk in your local community and pick up litter. If you're walking, you're outside, you meet people and you see things as they are. And if you have an affinity or a resonance with picking up litter and improving your local community that way, I think that you will have resonance with volunteering even in far-flung places. You should find a local service organization to support. All of these organizations need a website that isn't broken, or a backup strategy, or they need their network secured. These are things that you can do in your sleep. And then you can be creative with them to help expand their capabilities. The local organization may also have ties to a national or international organization, which creates an opportunity for you to help. If you do travel, you should travel certainly when you're starting with an organized group. You need to travel at the invitation of the local officials. If you just show up somewhere, your chance of being successful, making a difference there, are almost nil. You should have clear goals and have an exit plan. What's going to happen after you leave? Is everything just going to stop? And no matter what your plans are or what you do, when you get there, almost none of it is going to go smoothly, and you will have to improvise. You will not know the problem until you get there. And in fact, you may need to be there for a long time to actually know the problem. There are some things that you could do locally that have a global reach. It's very hard to write security software, like OpenSSL, for example. But it's easy to review it. You can take as much time as needed to looking at a section of code to figure out what it's doing and what it's supposed to do, and be able to find a flaw. You could make easy-to-use security products, and this is my current project. You could offer distance learning. You have expertise you can teach. And you can be creative. You might make something that has the impact of Kiva. some notes about the people that you work with when you're volunteering. The people that you're helping are generally just as smart as you. They care just as much about their family, about their community and their country as you do about yours. What they're missing is knowledge and opportunity. And they are experts in their environment. And when you show up, you're going to know almost nothing about their environment. I think you have a moral obligation to seek the truth. Most things are not as described by politicians or aid organizations or the media. You need to look at the results, not ideals. Recognize that when you show up somewhere, especially with a large group, you may take resources from the organization that you're working with. And a good strategy for you to make a difference is to align yourself with people who have already been successful and do not do harm. This is a very approachable way to learn economics and give yourself a chance to avoid unintended consequences and make the best possible difference. Levitt and Dubner wrote Freakonomics. You must be self-sufficient before you can help other people. You'll pay the cost of your travel and many of the local necessities. You should plan on leaving or donating your computers or tools so that your work can continue in your absence. And you must be resilient. As I mentioned, things will not go as planned. A quick note on working with other volunteers. When you work with volunteers, you don't get to pick who you work with. You should make a positive experience for the other volunteers. Your goal is to have them have a good experience so that they will continue to volunteer and so that they'll be better at volunteering. Particularly for this audience, you may have practical knowledge about travel, for example, or language or logistics or some extra resources that you can use to help the other travelers. Things like making connections in an airport in a distant city. The greatest reason to volunteer is actually for you. Travel and service are very humbling. You gain knowledge of the world as it really is. You may have a new perspective on your country or your community, and you may come back with greatly increased empathy and ability to focus. As far as I know, this is the only picture of me working that exists. And this is in rural Mexico, in a small hospital, in a small town. And I'm helping with a surgery. This has got a modern anesthesia machine. I switched it to English, and I had to fix several things on it before it could be used. And I tried to leave time for discussion. We have about 10 minutes. Really, I would like to hear about your experiences and your advice. I'll wait for the microphone.
Hi. It's very interesting that you mentioned the evidence-based economic approach to this, because that's, I think, separating the ideology from, if you want to really help the people at the bottom is really, really crucial. One thing in particular is the velocity of exchange, the volume of exchange. That really helps get these countries out of the trap. I mean, I'm working on a different project that we actually have working on the correlation between the violence and economic development, intellectual, and also emotional well-being of nations. And you see, as violence happens and the good example is the difference between South Africa, for example, and Zimbabwe. One took transformative path by leader like Nelson Mandela, and they see the fruit of that. And on the other hand, you see what happened to Zimbabwe. So it's really encouraging that I see your approach on this and mentioning those traps, because that resonates so well with what's going on, and shifting the focus on trying to integrate those countries into exchange model, not only on economic approach, but with volunteering is more than that. It's not only about economy, it's also about emotional and intellectual exchange that we have, and we can influence them. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for that. If I have an hour in my week spare, what is the best thing or the easiest thing I can do to solve a problem for someone if I am a programmer with decent technical ability?
Make a microloan? Well, you're asking me what to do, so I will tell you what to do.
Sure.
And that is make a microloan in 15 minutes, and then spend the other 45 minutes looking at OpenSSL.
Thank you.
You mentioned that much aid has had negative consequences. Do you have opinions on which aid organizations are better than others and which merit our support and volunteer work more than others?
No. So the longer answer is that I haven't seen one yet that has been completely successful. Almost all of the aid organizations are bureaucracies, and they supply based on bureaucratic, based on their own needs, on the needs of the people. UNICEF is the one that has the best reputation. And probably, if I had to pick one, I would pick them. I think that individuals can make as big a difference as these organizations. They cause as much harm as good. I mean, at best, it's wasted. But for governments, it's pretty clear that if they stopped, basically stopped all of the aid and instead removed barriers to trade. See, in the United States, we have huge subsidies for agriculture. Right? That's a barrier to trade. It would be extremely hard to remove those in our because of our bureaucracy. But if we stop the barriers to trade, the G8, G10, whatever, is basically a trading club where they agree not to charge tariffs to each other. We need to put everybody in Africa in that same boat. No tariffs for trade. Since I have around 5 minutes left, I'll mention cell phones. Most of the people that I'm showing pictures of have cell phones. Lots of them have smartphones. In rural Africa, cell phone minutes are used as currency, and they make a banking system because you can transfer the PIN for the minutes by making a call. It also links farmers with the markets, and they can know the price before they harvest. They can build their own cartels to match cartels of sellers. So technology, in many ways, they're leapfrogging because they don't have to have old technology. They can go right to the Moore's Law, cheap, high technology. And this generates opportunity for us. That was part of the be clever that I was thinking of. You may think of something that makes a huge difference.
So is it fair to say we have to concentrate on solutions that actually increase that velocity of exchange among people in the poor country based on the infrastructure that is there, possibility, and things that can be distributed? For example, use cell phone center based on SMS, for example, they don't have data plan, and using existing infrastructure.
They have all that stuff already. So, I think the best opportunity is to make a tool that they can use, one that they see the need for and that It lets them accomplish something they can't do now. And you just make that tool have some kind of income model so that it can be supported, self-supporting. And that could be it. Thank you again.
All right, we'll just take a short break and then